The trade deadline can change the entire dynamic for some teams, but it all depends if you make the right move.
Beyond Deshaun Watson, maybe some other names you're keeping an eye on before that November 2nd deadline.
I think you have to look at Odell Beckham Jr. there in Cleveland.
The 2021 NFL trade deadline is just around the corner. All 32 teams have at least one player who either isn't producing enough or is likely to leave anyway in the offseason. With that, let's dive into one player that every NFL team should trade by the deadline. Arizona Cardinals, Robert Alford. Hard to find a weakness on the Cardinals roster. They have firmly established themselves as a legitimate Super Bowl contender with a virtually unstoppable offense and a swarming defense that can beat you every single way. That said, Arizona might want to think about upgrading their cornerback depth. Veteran Robert Alford is on the wrong side of 30 and won't be able to contain the opposition's top wideout come playoff time. If you're the Cards, you may as well trade Alford to a cornerback-needy team. Then go out and use that draft capital to acquire an upgrade at the position. Atlanta Falcons, Mike Davis. Wide receiver and special teams artist, Cordarrelle Patterson, has taken over as Atlanta's top rusher. Davis recorded 1,015 yards of offense for the Carolina Panthers in 2020, but he hasn't been able to get anything going in Atlanta's pass-happy offense. It might be wise for the Falcons to cut bait and roll with Patterson as the undisputed RB1. Baltimore Ravens Sammy Watkins. Jackson has taken his game to another level as a pocket passer, but it's largely thanks to Mark Andrews and a breakout year from Marquise Brown. Plus, rookie Rashad Bateman is back and healthy. Jackson hasn't gotten it going with free agent wideout Sammy Watkins, and that's okay. The 2019 MVP is just doing fine without the former Chiefs wideout contributing much. If you're Baltimore, you may as well swap Watkins for another roster player or try to get a late round pick for him. Buffalo Bills Matt Breida. Alright, we're admittedly nitpicking here. The Bills shouldn't trade any of their starters because they're a top-tier football team with no overlay concerning roster weaknesses. That said, if they had to trade someone, why not veteran Matt Breida? They already have Zach Moss and Devin Singletary in the backfield. There are several teams with injuries in the backfield who should have interest in the San Francisco 49ers standout. Carolina Panthers AJ Bouye. The Panthers already swung blockbuster trades for 2020 first-rounder CJ Henderson and 2019 Defensive Player of the Year Stephon Gilmore. That makes veteran corner AJ Bouye expendable. The 2017 Pro Bowler is well past his prime and simply hasn't been much of a factor in Carolina's surprisingly stout defense. They may as well try to gain some value for Bouye as opposed to having him walk in free agency for nothing. Chicago Bears Allen Robinson. A-Rod reluctantly agreed to the franchise tag, hinting at the possibility that 2021 would be his final year in the Windy City. While Robinson is having an uncharacteristically down season, the Bears' rush-heavy offense doesn't seem to have a need for him anymore. Even Darrell Mooney's been outproducing. A-Rod would generate plenty of interest on the open market. The Bears could probably even fetch a second or third round pick for him. Cincinnati Bengals. Drew Sample. The Bengals used a second-round pick on Sample in 2019, so they probably don't want to give up on him just yet, as tight ends are known for developing later than most positions. However, the Bengals seem to be doing just fine with CJ Uzomah holding down the starting role, and Joe Burrow has a ton of other reliable pass catchers to lean on. Maybe now's a good time for Cincy to sell their former 52nd overall pick, while he still has some trade value. Cleveland Browns, Odell Beckham Jr. OBJ and Baker Mayfield just haven't been able to find the chemistry. It's frustrating to say the least. And it's time for GM Andrew Berry to move on. Beckham could fetch an early round selection, or at the very least a proven roster player. Lots of teams need help at receiver, and several GMs should be willing to pay up for Beckham. The longer Beckham remains in Cleveland, the more his stock will drop. So how much longer do they want to delay the inevitable? Dallas Cowboys, Leighton Vander Esch. Consider Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn, a candidate for assistant coach of the year. He has done a brilliant job transforming his defense that was historically awful a year ago. And Quinn has done this without a productive Leighton Vander Esch, who just hasn't been able to regain that 2018 Pro Bowl form. He's a liability in coverage, and just isn't making the big plays that other stars on Dallas defense are. Time to move on. Denver Broncos, Von Miller. The Broncos have crashed back down to earth after a 3-0 start. The good news is Von Miller is still performing at a Pro Bowl level at age 32, and that means the free agent to be can probably earn them a decent haul at the trade deadline. Yes, Miller will go down as one of the Broncos' all-time greats, but what's the sense of keeping him around when you know you're not going to pay up to keep him in the offseason? Sometimes you just gotta let go, and the Broncos better do it soon with Miller if they want to get anything in return for him. Detroit Lions, Trey Flowers. Flowers Flowers had a solid first season with the Lions back in 2019, when he recorded 7 sacks. But otherwise, his $90 million contract has been a travesty. The rebuilding Lions really just need to undergo a fire sale here. Flowers needs a fresh start and could enjoy a renaissance in the right system. We'd love to see him in Baltimore or Kansas City. Or hey, maybe Bill Belichick should consider bringing him back. Green Bay Packers, Kevin King. The Packers defense has been impressive despite injuries to key players. That said, veteran corner Kevin King continues to be a liability in coverage. And with a championship caliber roster intact, Green Bay can't have that. The smart call is to trade King and find another veteran corner to replace him ahead of the deadline. A King for BOUYE swap would make sense if Carolina was up for it. Houston Texans, Brandin Cooks. The speedy wideout continues to put up superb numbers, even on a lousy Houston team. This group desperately needs draft capital, and Cooks could fetch you at minimum a 3rd round pick at the deadline, maybe even more. Cooks makes plenty of sense for so many contenders. Could New Orleans bring him back? Would Green Bay be interested in pairing him with Devontae Adams? Lots of possibilities here, but the Texans need to sell Cooks while his value is at an all-time high. Indianapolis Colts, Marlon Mack. Jonathan Taylor is a top 5 running back, and Naheem Hines is one of the game's best receiving backs. So the Colts don't really have much of a use for Mack anymore. Mack seems to realize this as well, as he's already requested a trade, and the Colts have obliged.
Can you give us any context on what conversation you might have had with the team? I mean, we kind of know what your situation has been. I'm sure that's tough. What can you tell us about that?
We just had an agreement. What's best for me. They was just all with it, man. They supported me 100%. It's a mutual agreement, I would say.
Making it clear that the former 4th round pick is on the market. With so many teams suffering significant injuries to their backfields, you'd think Indy wouldn't have much of a problem finding a trade partner for a talented running back. Jacksonville Jaguars, Andrew Norwell. The Jaguars are awful and should unload practically every expensive veteran they have. That includes guard Andrew Norwell, who only has 1 year remaining on his contract. Norwell has been a decent player on one of the NFL's worst offensive lines. There's always a market for veteran guards, so the Jaguars should be able to fetch a mid to late round pick for him. Kansas City Chiefs, Daniel Sorensen. The Chiefs benched the veteran safety in favor of Juan Thornhill for their Week 6 game against Washington. Sorensen has been arguably the weakest link in that struggling defense, especially in coverage. GM Brett Veach will be a buyer at the deadline, but he may need to unload some contracts first. Trading this guy would only save them about $1 million in cap space. But trust me, they'll take it if it means someone taking the struggling safety off their hands. Las Vegas Raiders, Cleveland FERRELL. The Raiders have rarely used the number 4 pick from the 2019 draft. John Gruden, the guy who reached for him, is long gone. Time for the Raiders to trade FERRELL and see if they can get anything in return for him. Maybe someone else will see something in the former 4th overall pick and overpay for him. Los Angeles Chargers, Justin Jackson. Surely the Chargers will be buyers at the deadline, but it doesn't hurt to sell some assets. Then use that draft capital to go out and upgrade an area of weaknesses at the deadline. From Austin Eckler to Joshua Kelly to Justin Jackson and Larry Roundtree, there's an awful lot of mouths to feed in that Chargers backfield. Maybe it's time to get rid of one of them. Los Angeles Rams, Troy Reeder. Let's be honest, the Rams are rolling. They're loaded on both sides of the ball. Do they really need to trade anyone? If we had to pick one guy, it would be veteran linebacker Troy Reeder. He's seeing limited usage and isn't producing much in Raheem Morris' system. Maybe the Rams look to deal Reeder and recoup one of the many picks they've already traded away. Miami Dolphins, Will Fuller. The speedy Fuller has battled inconsistency and injuries in his first year with the Dolphins. Miami has been one of football's most disappointing teams in 2021. It's time to focus on 2022 and prepare for a deadline fire sale. We all know how much of an impact player Fuller is when healthy. He should be of interest to just about any playoff contender, really. Green Bay, New Orleans, Kansas City, you name it. Fuller won't be a Dolphin in 2022. No sense waiting till free agency to watch him walk. Minnesota Vikings, Sheldon Richardson. The Vikings are deep along their defensive line, so it may be a wise decision for them to try and use that depth to improve their roster at another position, like say their secondary. One player that they could consider unloading is Sheldon Richardson, who's on a 1-year contract. He'd free up over $2.2 million in cap space, and he'd probably fetch a solid return as well. New England Patriots, Dont'a Hightower. 2021 isn't going to be New England's year. Bill Belichick is accustomed to buying at the deadline, but he shouldn't hesitate to sell linebacker Dont'a Hightower, who's on his way to free agency. Assuming Belichick isn't keen on re-signing the 3-time Super Bowl champion, the safe bet is to trade him for something of value at the deadline. New Orleans Saints, Quan Alexander. The cap-strapped Saints released the veteran linebacker this offseason, only to bring him back in August. but their defense got by just fine without Alexander from week 2 to 5, while he was sidelined with an elbow injury. New Orleans doesn't need Alexander to compete for a playoff spot. GM Mickey Loomis should be able to land a late-round pick for him if he cuts bait now. New York Giants, Evan Ingram. The Giants are a bottom feeder again, and tight end Evan Ingram is a pending free agent. He's struggling this season and sure to play elsewhere in 2022. He could probably fetch a mid-round pick, given the lack of quality pass-catching tight ends in today's NFL. If that's the case, trading him is a no-brainer for the Giants. New York Jets, Marcus May. The star safety agreed to play under the franchise tag this season, rather than work on a long-term deal again in the offseason. The rebuilding Jets should trade May and gain more valuable picks to help the rebuild. Gotta think at least a dozen teams would have serious interest in him. The Jets raked in the draft picks when they traded away Jamal Adams last season. They need to take that same strategy here with May in 2021. Philadelphia Eagles, Derek Barnett. The Super Bowl 52 hero is a pending free agent, and the rebuilding Eagles should be among the many sellers at the deadline. Barnett, who has 3 seasons of 5+ sacks on his resume, has been a non-factor on the Eagles' struggling front seven. Knowing that he's not returning to Philly in 2022, trading him to a contender is an easy call. Pittsburgh Steelers, James Washington. Washington previously requested a trade, but the front office hasn't budged. Instead, they've left him to rot on their bench. Despite being banged up at the wide receiver position, he's barely been given any snaps. So why keep him around? It's time for the Steelers to trade him. Send him to a team that'll use him. San Francisco 49ers, Mohamed Sanu. It's too early to tell if the talented but underachieving 49ers will buy or sell. However, moving out veteran receiver Mohamed Sanu should be an easy decision. Sanu had success in Atlanta, but has been a non-factor since 2018. If you're GM John Lynch, you may as well get a late-round pick for Sanu. Maybe someone will take a chance on the veteran. Seattle Seahawks, Gerald Everett. The former Rams tight end hasn't gotten anything going in Seattle, and the Seahawks are likely to sell anyway as they continue to fall without Russell Wilson. We aren't used to seeing Seattle sell at the deadline, but 2021 is different. They've dealt a lot of picks over the last few years. Time to get a couple of them back by dealing Everett. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Ronald Jones. Bruce Arians has tried to light the fire under him, but things just aren't working out with Ronald Jones. There have been rumors that the 2019 second-round pick is being shopped. This is clearly Leonard Fournette's backfield now. The Bucs would be wise to get whatever they can for Rojo, at least at this point. Tennessee Titans, Josh Reynolds. It seems like a lot of NFL teams could use some wide receiver help right about now. And what do you know? The Tennessee Titans just so happen to be loaded at the position. One guy who hasn't been able to make much of an impact from their receiving core is 2021 free agent signing Josh Reynolds. He had some success in Sean McVay's system with the Rams. Maybe some team will recognize that and be willing to fork over a draft pick for him. Washington football team, Brandon Scherff. The All-Pro guard is slated to hit free agency after the season, and Washington isn't going to contend for a playoff spot. You see where we're going with this? If a Scherff trade does go down, it could easily be the biggest move we see at the deadline. Which do you think will be the biggest move of the 2021 NFL trade deadline? Join me in the comment section below. Make sure to follow myself and TPS on social media. We post great content all the time. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, we're on everything. Go subscribe, go follow. If you like this video, give it a like. It takes one click down below, and subscribe to TPS. We post videos every day. Of course, thank you so much for watching. I'm Jason Biondo. I'll see you next time.
On my knees.
Bye.